I am the Communication and Outreach Assistant this season at National Audubon Seabird Institute. I am so excited to be joined today by Rafael Angelo Revoredo, a Hertz International Research Fellow who has partnered with Audubon to tag and track species like the endangered roseate tern. Rafa is a PhD student at the Federal University of Rio Grande do Norte in Brazil. He is specifically researching roseate terns ecology and habitat dynamics from Maine to Brazil. Thank you so much for taking the time to be here today, Rafa.
Thank you, Sophie. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today to learn a little bit about tracking birds. It's my honor and my pleasure being here and sharing a little bit about these experiences with you guys.
Yeah, I'm so excited to get into it. Could you just, I know you have some great presentation materials for us. Could you just give us an overview of the project you are working on?
Oh, yeah, so great. Let me open this presentation here. So to talk about the research and conservation of migratory species using tracking devices, I am using the roseate terns as a case study, which is part of my PhD project. I would like to start just bringing my story with these birds and how this began. Um, so, like many other scientists of our generation, my journey actually with seabirds started, especially with the roseate terns, started not with living birds, which is kind of sad, but with casualties. On Brazil beaches, I first heard about roseate terns dying under power lines by colliding with them. And I often say that I knew the impact on the species before I knew the species itself. But witnessing this problem motivated me to dedicate my life and my work to seabird conservation, and is how I started to look closely to these birds. So we in Brazil, the roseate terns specifically, they are elusive. We rarely see them on the beaches, and we lack knowledge about their distribution, what they're doing during the day, where they're resting during night. So we don't know almost anything about them. And a beach monitoring in Brazil, led by a university and a local organization, recorded dozens of individuals every year killed under power lines. Yet most of them we didn't know where they came from, where they are going. And at the opposite side of the world, in the North Hemisphere and the colonies, scientists know these birds really well during the breeding season. So in the US, researchers like Don Lyons and Kina Yakola at National Audubon Seabird Institute have been tracking roseate terns and also a lot of different terns and birds. But most of these birds, they lost the track of them when they migrate to the south because there's no antennas for the tracking devices that we use in the South America to download data, and also the technology still doesn't allow us to download data by wireless or to satellites directly or to cell phones. So we need kind of antennas close to the birds, and these work really well in the breeding colonies. So we have kind of two worlds, two hemispheres, and both kind of missing half of the story. We didn't know where the roseate terns are going here in Brazil, where they are coming from, and the same thing was happening when the birds leave the breeding colonies in the US. So this actually started our collaboration, and this international collaboration, changed everything. So through the Herz Fellowship at Audubon Seabird Institute, I went to Maine in 2024 and 2025, and also this year. I trained in Maine. I learned advanced telemetry techniques, and working side by side with Keen and Dawn, we tagged like different species of birds, including the Roseatte terns. And back in Brazil, this partnership was reinforced with Mass Audubon and also the American Museum of Natural History, the university that I am a PhD student, the UFN, and SEMAN, the NGO that I also work here in Brazil. So we all joined forces and we get together to tag Roseatte terns also in Brazil and trying to connect both hemispheres and trying to understand the entire full cycle of this Roseatte terns. So I basically want to bring all this background because this is part of my life and this is part how tracking data became something so interesting for me. And I think this also give you guys and everybody's here watching like a little bit of background and how this problem actually inputted me and jumped me in this entire seabird world and my entire willingness and doing some effort for conservation of these birds. So these findings, when we started to connect data and do some findings together, we discovered these connections that we are missing during migration between the habitats, the breeding habitats in the US and also in the Brazilian roosting spots during the winter. And we started to put more efforts together for conservation because protecting the birds in a country means little if they remain at risk in another country. So it's the same birds. And so we need to protect them in the entire range of the occurrence. So now we are trying to use this information and building actual information. I'll be showing you some maps and some tracking data, but we are trying to use this information that we are obtaining to support more marine bird plans and also inform energy development. Particularly, our biggest concern is also with offshore wind development. And as you see in Brazil, power lines can be a problem even in onshore and the beaches. So due to the coastal expansion. So it's some research that we start locally, but already have like global consequences in this aspect.
So interesting. So what species specifically are you working with?
So my main focus is on the terns, especially Roseatte terns. But in Maine, specifically, we tag different species. I will give you like a little bit of the range of the species that you have been working on in Maine right now. But we have been tagging the 4 species of terns. So we have here in the top the common tern, this one with the more orange bill, just a little bit of the tip of the bill, black. I'll give a quick ID of these birds. I think that can be interesting for people who is watching. But the Roseatte terns in Maine, they have like this more black bill. And the least terns, which are the smallest terns that we have in Maine, with this yellow bill with the tip black. And also the Arctic terns here in Keenan's hands, which has like a little shorter bill compared to the Roseatte terns and the common terns, and it's really cherry red bill. So we tag all these birds with different types of tags, and during the breeding season, these birds, the terns, give us a lot of information about the foraging area. So the tracks informing a lot where they are foraging when they're incubating the eggs yet, and after the chicks hatch, where they start to go for bringing fish, how these behaviors change among time during the breeding season. And for international migratory perspective, we're really interested in where the common terns are going. We have some common terns that come to the north of Brazil. Other common terns all go all the way down to Argentina or to the south of Brazil. But we don't know how they decide to split, how they decide some of them just stay in the north of Brazil, or they're going all the way down. So this is something that we're trying to figure out. And also the Roseatte terns, which I just talked a lot about, but the Roseatte terns don't go all the way down to Argentina. They stop in the middle of the coast of Brazil. So they're more tropical during the winter time. So they stay in the northeast part of Brazil, but we still don't know how they are distributed around the coast of Brazil, and if they split and some of them staying a part of the country, and other part of them go a little bit southward. And the Arctic terns, the longest migrant bird, migrant tern, which goes all the way down to Antarctica. So understanding all these migratory paths are really important for these three species. The least terns, we have been trying to put, the technology is advancing really quickly. So this year we use it like some tags that have tiny solar panels, but the tags need to be smaller. So these tags are not so strong in terms of data offload as the other terns tags. So we still don't know a lot about where the least terns are going after the breeding season. But this is something that we really want to understand more, and maybe the technology will be allowing us to discover soon. And also we tag another group of birds that are the alcids. Between the alcids, we basically tag the puffins and the razorbills. So the razorbills, we use different kinds of tags. So this one is a leg band tag, but we also have satellite tags for razorbills that we will be deploying this year yet. And the storm petrels, these tiny little cute birds that also nest in burrows. So I have the birds that nest in burrows here, and then we need like different types of tags, different types of attachment. And I'm assuming that seeing these pictures of the bird tag, it seems like it's easy, it's already done, you already have a bird with a tag, but a lot needs to happen till we have a tag in the bird, and including scheduling the perfect timing for tagging the bird, defining the best method of attachment in the bird is also really important. The type of tag that we'll be using, some birds as the razorbills. Look the name of this bird. So they're having really strong bills that can probably destroy an antenna of the tag. So we need to understand how the bird behavior and decide the type of tag, the type of antenna. And of course, capturing the birds is one of the most challenging parts of all this work. And for these birds here, the birds that nest in burrows, we can, in the breeding colonies as in Maine, the best way is just finding the birds directly on their nests and going to the burrows. If the bird is there, sometimes we can grab directly with the hands. Sometimes we need some extension tools of our hands, so we can use, we call in the islands as grabbers, which is basically a kind of tool that allows us to go deeper in some deep burrows for grabbing the bird. So for the birds that nest in burrows is more kind of directly going to the burrow and getting the bird. And for birds as the terns that nest in like open sky nest, then we need to use different types of traps. I don't have any precise picture of that, but basically we have bow net, which is a kind of trap that closes on top of the nest as soon as the bird comes back. And we also use a kind of box trap, which has a small door with a treadle. And when the bird is coming back to their nests and step on the treadle, a sliding door closes and the bird stay inside of the nest, closed in this box, and we go there, get the bird, and proceed with the tagging. And all this needs to happen really quickly, really safely for the birds. If the birds has eggs in their nest, we need to change these eggs for fake eggs, so the birds will be safe. And when you're going there to get them, sometimes they flap a little bit, they try to go away, and this could damage the egg. So we need to change the egg quickly for a fake egg. And as soon as we have the bird, we put the real eggs carefully back, and the bird can keep incubating. The mate can come and keep incubating while we are tagging the bird. So it's a lot of things that need to happen. And each bird, even having attachment way defined, and what we need to do also has individual particularities, like different size bodies, different weights. So we need to individually adjust how we are putting a tag in the bird. So I brought some videos here of the terns tagging. We use attachment system that we call leg loops, which is basically a kind of harness that come under the legs in a part of the body that we joke calling like the leg pits, which is the closely name that we can find for where the harness are going under. But it's almost like a little backpack, and with the harness going under the legs. So we go, someone holds the bird while other person is trying to put the loops around to each leg. And then we need to fit the harness under of each leg. The bird is really safe. This bird is more wiggling a little bit more, but usually they get really quiet in the hands. And we put the loops under the legs, and then we adjust individually for each animal precisely each side of the loop in a way that is comfortable for the bird. The bird should keep all their movements and should keep everything happening okay. So usually these birds, as soon as we finish tagging and we release, 1 hour later in maximum, they go directly to the sea. They get a bath for getting clean again after being touched by humans. But 1 hour later, they're already back in maximum to the nest. Some of them takes longer, some of them shorter, but they just come back directly to the nest, and you can keep following during the entire breeding season how they are behaving, how they are being parents, how they are feeding the chicks and everything else. And we never had any problem. So usually is pretty okay for the birds. carrying these little tags on them. But all these things that I just showed to you happens in the breeding colonies where the birds are just there in the nests. So we go there, capture the birds, tag the birds, but we also tagged birds in Brazil, as I mentioned in the beginning of this conversation. And for tagging birds in Brazil, is more challenging because we don't have nests. And we need to trick the birds at night for capturing them in the roosting spots. So for that, we use what we call mist nets, which is basically a kind of a really thin and flexible net that usually people use for passerines, for capturing passerines and bending birds. But you can see here in this beach, this big wall of mist nets, and we distribute along this mist net a lot of small stickers with the calls of the birds. And this is during the day, but we just open the net when it's completely dark. The birds can have a beautiful view of the nets if they have light. So we need to do this in dark at night without a lot of moonlight and being under the dark all time, just using headlamps with the red light. And after we capture the birds in the nets, after they hit the nest and you go there and remove the birds, then we do the same process that I just showed to you in the dark in the beach. So we prepare a tagging area and we do everything directly in this little camping area that we set in the sandbanks on the area that we are capturing. And with that, we have birds that are tagged in Brazil, and then we also recover data from these birds in the breeding colonies in the US, and you can have the entire migration data for these guys. This is happened for the Roseatte terns. So we also tried to tag in the past common terns, but the main effort have been for Roseatte terns. And here in Brazil, I'm kind of having some of difficulty for tagging cabot terns, which should happen next week. I will be departing my mission for finding them and trying to catch with different kinds of traps and mist nets for tagging them. We don't know anything about cabot terns too. So it would be really exciting trying to discover a little bit about these guys.
Wow, so interesting, so cool. I just wanted to point out for our audience members that we will have a chance to take audience questions at the end. So make sure you submit those if you have any. But just kind of a wrap-up question on my end, wrap-up guiding question. What's the importance of tracking these birds, and what obstacles do they face on their migratory journeys?
Yeah, so let's see if I can. So that the importation, like what kind of information these tracks can bring to us is so valuable and so a lot of different aspects. But I would like to exemplify with some tracks here that I put together. But one of these breakthrough points for us was between 2024 and 2025, when we have the first complete migration records for Roseatte terns between Brazil and the US. So one of the birds that we tagged just here in the northeast of Brazil was later recorded in the top in Maine. And this was the first full documented spring migration of a roseate tern from the Maine population. So this data revealed a lot of information, including important stopover sites in the northern Brazil and the Caribbean. So how these birds also interacted with the Caribbean's populations, we are starting to understand a little bit how which spots they use for resting before keeping going the migration, and we also understood better how is the pace of migration, how these birds storage energy for keep going. So we know, for example, that some birds, after stopping Puerto Rico, they go directly to the east coast of the US without stopping, flying about 8 to 9 days sometimes. So these birds need to be really prepared. Some of them stop it in the water, but usually they don't stop at all, and they fly directly between these two spots. So all this information we discovered with these first records of the spring migration data. And also this kind of information allow us to understand a little bit more about how these birds can cross areas that are planned for energy development in the sea as the offshore wind farms. So these records for Roseatte terns, a federally endangered species, showed how these birds are flying already around licensed areas of offshore wind farms in the U.S., in the east coast of the U.S. So these insights had never seen before, and these help us to understand how we can protect more these birds and increase plans for conservation and plans for mitigation in case of development in the ocean. And also, we understand and learn a lot about behavior. So this map that I'm showing you guys here is from the northeast coast of Brazil and is a crop of just in front of the state that these birds usually having roosting spots during night. So there's some kinds of statistics and modeling that we can base it in the tracking information and how long and how far one point of tracking data is from the other one, and how fast this bird flew from this point to this other point, and how was the angle of this bird. So if this bird completely pivoted in another direction or keep going the same direction, there's some mathematic models that we can understand the behaviors based in these aspects of the data. So we can understand, for example, when the bird is just commuting, just displacing between one area to another area and just flying without trying to fish or trying to rest. We can understand when the birds are resting and when the birds are foraging, like actively foraging. And these maps like show perfectly where these birds are developing each type of behavior. So we see here that the birds are resting in 3 specific spots. These green dots in the map is the 3 specific spots that these birds going back at the end of the day and rest during night. And during the day, these birds commute between these roosting spots to offshore areas almost 8 kilometers far from the coast and to start to foraging. So this foraging activity here in Brazil, as an example, happens following the slope of the continent, so the continental shelf break. So we have the birds just foraging here. We don't know why exactly, if there's a specific type of prey there, or if there's some source of resurgence current that brings more nutrients to the top of the water, and then more fishes are probably breeding in that area. This is part of also what I'm trying to figure out during my PhD. So, but definitely the birds are following this really deep part of the ocean and foraging, and in the end of the day, they commute back for the resting spots. So this is a kind of thing that we can understand which behavior these birds are doing in each moment of during the tracking data. And we can plot this kind of data with proposed development areas. So we don't have any offshore wind farm in Brazil yet, but we have several proposals for development. And this is some polygons that are proposed for our state here. And as you can see, they are just overlapping in the commuting areas of the Roseatte terns between the resting spots and the foraging spots for the Roseatte terns. So how we can think about protecting these birds during the development of this kind of facilities. Is there a way to creating paths for these birds? How we can mitigate and impact in different types of behaviors. So this is another type of information that we are trying to figure out and put together with the tracking data. So I would say that the tracking research needs to be a long-term effort, needs to be continuous, because the telemetry will allow us to understand how this bird responds also to different environmental changes and also climate change. If you have sea level rise, how these birds are picking new spots for resting, how they would be affected in the migratory route. So, and this needs to happen with international collaboration, especially when we're talking about migratory species. So, and then we can help them with more conservation efforts. So I just for tying this thought about the importance of this data, I would say that this high quality data and science becomes more meaningful when we have like local scientists becoming active voices in these different spots and advocating not just in the scientific journals, but also in policy dialogues within their territories and talking about the development of each area. So migratory and wide-ranging species recognize no borders, and our conservation efforts also shouldn't have any border either. So the Roseatte terns, they remain further listed as threatened just in Brazil and in the United States also. So collaborations like that, led and inspired by National Audubon, are what drive us to more meaningful conservation efforts and also fewer blind spots, as I told you in the beginning. So we're trying to have this full cycle overview.
Well, amazing. So interesting. We have several audience questions, but just before we get to those, there was one thing that we discussed before we went live that I thought would be interesting to touch on. Just you recently wrapped up your research efforts here in Maine, and I asked what a highlight was, and I really liked the story that you gave. If you could just reiterate that for the audience.
Yeah, so one of the highlights for this season, as you saw, all these efforts are really recent, especially with the Roseatte terns. The technology just allowed us to start to understanding better about the migration data recently. And one bird that we tagged here in Brazil in February of last year, so February 2025, we find this bird. So this bird flew back to Maine, was our first spring migration data from Maine population. And this bird flew back to Maine last year, and it didn't nest there, but was in the colony. We saw it, and we saw the tag. The tag was working, and he left it during the winter, and we didn't had any data from him since then. And this year, we saw this bird back in Maine again, still with the tag. So this tag has a time they stay in the bird, and this bird also stayed with the same tag for more than 1 year. The tag was not working like downloading data anymore, but probably was still getting data. So we were able to remove the tag of this bird, and we sent back to the company. We're still waiting what they can get from the data chip and the tag. But if we have a lot of data, we'll have the first entire annual cycle of a Roseatte Tern ever. So that's really exciting, and it was really exciting finding this bird again this year in the Stratton
So
Island.
exciting. Yeah, I love hearing stories like that, and also just moments when, I don't know, so much effort is put into this work, and then there's just these moments of chance that happen that make seabirds exciting. Okay, so now just getting into the audience questions. Somebody asked, how do you safely capture and tag a roseate tern without causing too much stress to the bird?
So all the permitting and everything that we need to do, um, there's a complex protocol that we need to follow. But for roseate terns specifically, we can't handle these birds for more than 10 minutes. So we need to be really prepared as soon as we get the bird and tag them and release them really safely and carefully. So um, as if we do everything in this time without going and pushing further than that, we are not actually allowed to push for more time than that. If it's something happening that is never happened before, but if we see that something is not going well, we just stop there and we release the bird immediately. But usually everything, because we're really trained and prepared for doing that, we can do everything really quickly. Sometimes even in 6 minutes, 7 minutes, we have the bird, we tag the bird and release the bird. So this first needs to happen really quickly. And second, we need to guarantee that the nest it's intacted, like it's everything okay with the egg. So as I told you, we quickly change the eggs for a fake egg, and we capture the bird. We close. So roseate terns especially, they nest kind of a nest covered almost in a burrow in the rocks. Some of them in human-made boxes that we put in the colony to increase more birds coming and nesting. So it's kind of safely for capturing them, because we basically, when the bird enter in the nest, we close the entrance with a trap that just flaps on the top of the entrance, so we can go there, pick the bird really quickly, swipe the eggs back for the real egg, and then quickly process them. So roseate terns are usually the quickest birds that we need to do, and we keep tracking of them after that. So all these birds are monitored in the Seabird Institute islands, and all there are tracked during the entire breeding season. So we keep track of the tagged birds, if they are behaving okay, if they're feeding the chicks, if the chicks hatch it, and so we can keep the standard and the safety of the bird of the entire season.
Awesome. Yeah, definitely. When we talk about tagging, that's a question that comes up a bunch, and yeah, really interesting. And there, yeah, so much work that goes into it. So interesting. Another question from an audience member: have any tracked terns made migrations that were completely unexpected?
Hmm. That's so one of the birds that we have this migration when I show you the first map that I open here, we don't have a lot of tracks of these birds yet, but one of them, uh, so this yellow bird here, this yellow track, is the only bird that came completely left until Cuba during migration after a quick stop in Puerto Rico. And we are not expecting a bird visiting Cuba before going up. So it get closer a little bit to the Gulf of the Gulf of Mexico and for going up. And also this pink track here did a weird movement that we still don't understand, but was also unexpected, which was a loop. So this bird arrived in Puerto Rico and then came all the way down to Venezuela again, and then go all the way up again to Puerto Rico and then finish the migration. So we have some individual kind of interesting movements that we don't know why these individuals like are not following the pattern that we see in other ones. And this is really interesting because we can access a little bit of individual variation also in how they decide to do movements.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I think this is one of these interesting unexpected moments.
Yeah, it is interesting because there are migratory routes that we know of, and then there are individual birds making decisions sometimes. So funny to see their personality come out in their migratory routes. Um, okay, another audience question: are there any exciting new research questions you're having these tracking you're hoping this tracking data will answer in the future? Sorry, I butchered that. But let me repeat. Are there any exciting new research questions you're hoping this tracking data will answer in the future?
So yeah, a lot of them. There's a lot of open questions yet. But one of our biggest gaps right now is understanding the movements. For example, I will bring one species here because my main focus is the Roseatte terns. So I will bring the Roseatte terns as an example. But so we still don't understand nothing that they do between September and May. So we tagged these birds in northeast of Brazil in February. So they are birds that are just in this area in the northeast part of Brazil, um, and we get the migration when they leave this spot, they already migrate back, and we have the entire spring migration. But until arrive in this moment, we don't know anything. So we don't know if this bird, some of the birds stay, like if the population splits a little bit, and some of them stay in a part of the South America, and other part go down, or if they do a kind of winter migration in the wintering grounds, if they arrive and stay together in a spot during September, and then they move south a little bit during December, and then they move southward in January, and then they start to move up. So understanding this timing and understanding where they are going will allow us to protect different areas and to increase the conservation efforts in different areas in different times of the year. So this is our main gap for this species now, and it's just an example in understanding timing and where the species are and where they're doing their so we can do something about the conservation of them.
Awesome. Okay, another audience question. What can tracking tell us that traditional bird banding can't?
That's a great question, because as you already know, bird banding have been being applied for birds for a long time, but also needs a lot of effort for recovering data. So it's kind of, with the bird banding, you are seeing pictures. Imagine like a long movie, like a 90 minutes movie, and you can see with the bird banding the picture of the minute one of the movie, then you see a scene of the 30 minutes of the movie, then you see again 60 minutes of the movie, then you see the end of the movie. And you didn't understand the entire movie because you are having glimpses in where the bird are appearing. And we need people doing effort for trying to find these bands, to read these bands, or to recapture these birds, and understand uh, the entire life. So bird banding is really important. Uh, it's cheap and is a way to understanding survival of the birds, for understanding if the birds are coming back for the same breeding colonies or to the same spot they rest each year. So understanding surviving it, especially surviving of birds, birding banding is the best. But for understanding the movie of their life of the birds, we with the birding, with the tagging, we can see more scenes of this entire movie in a better resolution. You can see the minutes 1, 2, 3, 4, and even if we don't watch the entire movie, we can have a much better idea what is happening in this movie of the bird life, and we can extrapolate this sometimes for the entire population. And with 2 or 3 or even a dozen of birds tagged, you can understand the movie life of a lot of birds. You can understand individual survival. This will happen with the bird banding. So one thing doesn't exclude the other thing. Both needs to occur together. And one are informing uh, a scene of this life, a moment of this life, and the entire migration or entire cycle, the patterns and behavior, and the other one will be indicating survival of this individual along a long time. I don't know if I.
Yeah, I liked that metaphor a lot. That's great. Okay, getting some more audience questions in here. This is great. How precise is the tracking data? Can you actually tell when the bird is feeding versus just flying?
Great. So this comes a little bit deep in the type of analysis and type of resolution of the data. So we have different types of technology and tags materials, but basically the resolution is the amount of, talking about the movie again, is the amount of frames that you have about this tracking data. So if you have a point each 5 minutes, you have much fine resolution. You can understand much better like fine scale movements. If you have each 1 minute, you know exactly if the bird is moving from this corner to 2 meters further. So we have really fine scale movements, and this it's really precise. And sometimes we can get really fine movement data, and with this fine movement data, we can do analysis that actually show us the precise behavior that the bird is developing there. With more rough data, rough resolution data, like 1 hour data, I can tell if the bird if I have 1 point each hour, I can tell if the bird is, in the moment that the point the GPS point that I get, I don't know what the bird were doing there. If it was just flying, or if it was foraging, or if it was resting. But I know where the bird is and in a bigger time scale, so I can access a longer movement data, so I can understand better migration. So more rough data will inform me where the bird is in each hour of the day, or even if I have 1 point a day for a bird like Arctic tern, I can say where this bird is crossing Africa, when this bird is crossing Africa, which day the bird is crossing Africa before arriving in Antarctica. So depending of the resolution of the data, you can precise access different information. And this depends also, of course, of your research questions.
Awesome. Okay, just cruising through these questions here so we can be respectful of your time. What are some of the biggest challenges roseate terns face during migration?
So roseate terns, especially right now, they need a lot of different spots for resting. And these spots are usually related to sandbanks or some small islands in the Caribbean area, and also um, as as I show you in the map before, in some moments they do like this sprint between some spots to other, directly flying by the sea. So we have all these concerns about what is happening in the sea. So the biggest challenges that we start to think more is how these land areas that they rest and they stopovers areas are being affected by human development, and also by climate change. If we have more sea level rise, if this area will be still available in the future. And in the sea itself, we are concerned about development of offshore wind, oil rigs, boat traffic, everything that happens in this open waters can affect also how the birds do their decisions and how they will be flying and how they will be under risk. So nowadays, I would say that the biggest challenges are still in land, in the coastal development, and how they're pushing for habitat suppression and habitat loss of these species, and the concern with also sea obstacles are becoming bigger and bigger because of this type of energy development.
Super interesting. Yeah, definitely a hot topic right now, especially in conservation, where sustainable energy and wind farms are a good thing, but sometimes they are not a good thing for the birds. So just finding that balance and making sure we are respectful of these endangered species. Okay, on to a few more audience questions before we wrap up. Have you ever tracked a roseate tern from the Caribbean population?
Yes, which was surprising because so in Brazil we received birds from the east coast population in the U.S. and also from Caribbean population, but we don't know who is who. So when you're trapping here in the Brazil, when you open the mist nets, some birds, sometimes you get some birds with bands. So when you get the birds with bands, as you already know, we discover which island they're from. Usually the chicks receive the bands when they're just hatched. So we can figure out if they are from east population of the U.S. This there's no a lot of that I know at least, there's no banding effort of Roseatte terns happening right now in any part of the Caribbean population. So a lot of the naked legs birds, we don't know where they're from. They can be birds that are not banded from East Coast population, or they can be from Caribbean population. And we got a bird from I think we tagged 2 birds that we know um, from Caribbean population. One of them didn't nest in the Caribbean islands, but it was around the entire summer. It was just around these islands in the Caribbean. So we are also starting to talk a little bit of skipping years birds. This is a hot topic in science right now in trying to figure out how the birds decided actually to skip a year of breeding. So we don't know that if could be a East Coast population bird that just decided to be around the Caribbean and didn't nest there and didn't go directly to the East Coast, or if was a bird from the Caribbean population itself, but it didn't nest at that moment. But another bird, the second bird that we tagged, yes, we saw uh, data behavior consistent with having a nest, which is basically flying from a spot and coming back every day, and like is consistent with foraging trips and coming back to the same spot. So we assumed this bird as a bird from Caribbean population. So the answer of this question is, for sure we have one that we know that we tagged, but hopefully with more tagging happening in Brazil, if we can keep going these efforts, we can understand more also about the Caribbean population. And we also have been collecting feathers during this tagging efforts, because there's some genetical analysis that can classify some birds if they are from Caribbean population or East Coast population. And the idea is trying to figure out this in the future. So I have been collecting samples for trying to figure out that.
All right, so interesting. Okay, 2 more questions here from the audience. Is there one individual tern that has become a favorite because of its unique journey?
I that's unfair because I love all the Roseatte terns that I tagged, but the bird that we just recovered the tag this year, the field readable, which is a band that we can read from far in the field, is W56. Is a yellow band. W56 is the name of the bird, and this bird is now kind of my favorite because it's the second year that I watching him coming back to the breeding colony, and I can see with the tag. And this year it nested and is nesting in a box that we put there for increasing the ability of birds nesting more in the island. So it's a tagged bird, there's nesting in the box, and that's really, really exciting. And I'm kind of attached with this bird.
Awesome. I would be too. Okay, final question. What are some ways members of the public can help protect roseate terns even if they don't live near the coast?
Yeah, so I think when you're talking about conservation and talking about trying to make people aware of environment in general or conserving species, we need to educate. So we need to outreach. There's no way of people caring about something if they don't know about something. So just make people more enthusiastic about birds, about roseate terns, about the challenges they face, because we don't know where kids are, what kids are becoming when they're growing up. What we don't know a lot of people can have different possibilities in their works of making a pitch about that and making some effort in their companies that they work that can fund and they can find more attention for conservation, for NGOs that work with conservation. So I would say make people aware about conservation and educate and outreach about birds and roseate terns in this case.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Hafa. It's been a real pleasure. I learned so much, and I'm sure the audience did as well. Really, really cool work that you're doing. Yeah, and I hope the rest of your season goes really well.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody that was joining us today and that are interested in roseate terns or in tracking. And was a really big pleasure sharing this information with you guys today.